Magdalene, can you see? Yes, thank you very much. Okay, welcome everyone to our webinar today. Thank you for honoring our call to join our webinar today. My name is Magdalene Landi. I am the VP Marketing Communications at SBM Bank. SBM is a bank that hopes to walk the journey that you have as a business owner, and we want to take you through creating a business continuity plan today. With us today, we are joined by several panelists. The first, who is Kotsanai Matereke. Kotsanai is the founder and senior partner of Tactive Consulting. He has 10 years progressive experience in supporting businesses develop holistic business strategies. He also has experience in managing a global supply chain producing in sub-Saharan Africa and exporting to the US, Europe, and Asia. So he's got quite some interesting stories when he tells you how he started doing sub-exports out into the US and Europe. And he also has experience working with over 30 SMEs directly in capacity building, and is a business coach, management consultant, and a board advisor. We also have with us Sam Mbaka, who is the Vice President and Head of SME and Commercial Banking at SBM Bank, Kenya. He's got 19 years progressive experience in banking, having worked with Gyro, which was absorbed by INM, DTB, Chase Bank, and presently SBM Bank. He's an expert in cultivating and maintaining key relationships with exceptional relationship management skills. He's got an understanding of asset finance and SME client relations. And has an outstanding banking management professional with an extensive experience in building growth strategies for SMEs. We also have Davis Ayako, who is the head of data analytics. CP Ayako is the head of data analytics for the bank. She has over 13 years experience in banking, having worked with TCB Group in various capacities. In his last assignment was head of finance in South Sudan. He later joined NIC Bank, which is now NCBA, as the GM in charge of financial reporting strategy before joining SBM. He's a certified public accountant and a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya. He has a wealth of experience in financial reporting, financial analysis, project management, strategy research, and data analytics. He's our go-to guy for anything around macros. So he will be taking us through the macro environment with looking at a landscape for SMEs. And then we have my co-host, who is David Kanyora, who will be joining us to just take us through the program today. And we'll start off with the macro environment. And I'll introduce or invite Davis Ayako to take us through this particular session. Thank you. You may post any of your questions in the chat section. There's a Q&A section. Post any questions that you have. We'll be here to answer any queries that you have. If you need anything clarified, we'll be able to assist you. Davis, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magdalene, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll be taking us through the macroeconomic environment. I'll be narrowing it down into specifically the Kenyan market. So my presentation is titled COVID-19 Pandemic, Balancing Health Concerns and Economic Stability. Now, this is a key point because we are currently dealing with a health crisis that has obviously had a knock-on effect on the economy, so the economy is reeling from this particular health concern. We can move to the next slide. Yeah, so I thought it was important just to start off with the current state of affairs in terms of the current situation and how it is unfolding. I know these are numbers that you probably see on a daily basis, and obviously some of them are too good from a statistic perspective. Now, this was the status of 6th of July, and I really wanted to have that date there so that by the time we were having this particular one, we will be able to see how the numbers have unfolded. And just looking at the statistics as of yesterday, which is about 10 days later, the number of cases globally has grown by 20%. We are currently stand at 13,950,000 in terms of cases reported. In terms of fatalities, in the 10 days, there's been a growth of 10%. In terms of the recovery rate, in the 10 days, that is up by 26%. So some bit of hope in terms of recovery rate, obviously much faster than the number of cases and fatalities that we have seen. So as of 6th of July, the recovery rate globally was 57%. And as of yesterday, this has improved. We now stand on a global perspective at 59%. But obviously, there are some countries that have really managed the infection rates, which have either rised or come down. So specifically looking at China, which is where all of us perceive this to have originated from, the recovery rate currently stands at 94%. So just looking at China, in the last 10 days, they have reported an additional 65 new cases. Unlike other parts of the globe, so looking at Kenya in the last 10 days, we have reported additional cases of 3,787, which is a 48% growth in the number of cases. Fatalities have grown by 36%. The recovery rate has improved in the last 10 days as well. Looking at the US, this is where we see some significant rise in the numbers. So the US in the last 10 days, there has been about 709,000 new cases. And looking at the whole of Africa in the last 10 days, we've had about 187 new cases. So as an opener for the discussion we are having is basically everybody really wants to know exactly when this pandemic will be finished, which will then signal, the reopening of economies around the world. So just looking at the next slide. So this is what we keep hearing from the experts of flattening the curve. So once we are able to then flatten the curve, that will mean then resumption in some trade across countries and also in country. So this picture looks at the position or situation where some of the countries or regions are at the moment. So looking at Kenya, the number of cases, as I have mentioned, are on the right. So we are still at the pandemic phase where we still continue to see the numbers rise. Similar to Europe and the US, just looking at the total, you see the numbers are quite high. So Asia and specifically China have managed to contain the numbers. The numbers have not risen as sharply as they did at the start of the pandemic phase. So once economies are able to then ensure that their numbers are at low levels, then it will be much safer, and obviously people will have a lot more confidence that they're able to do business in the normal fashion, in terms of being able to go out there and do your shopping and not worry about health concerns. So next slide, we look at the economic performance across the globe. So in terms of the economic parameter here would be the GDP. And the GDP essentially measures the wealth of every nation. So just looking at before this pandemic, the global GDP was already on a deceleration. A number of issues happening around the globe, especially in the developed market, have contributed to lower year-on-year GDP. So looking at globally, GDP came down from 3% to 2.9%. So already the economy globally for most countries, and most recently was on a downward trend, just looking at the position as of 2019 and 2018. So looking at globally and some of the developed nations in terms of what has contributed to this, the key items are policy uncertainties in certain regions. Obviously, this led to a lot of trade tensions, especially between China and the US. We know there has been that trade war that has been there between the two nations. In terms of the European Union and the UK, this was another one. So the discussion around Brexit has been, quite lengthy and quite uncertain. So that trade business decisions within this region. So coming closer to Saharan Africa as well, marginal deceleration from 3.2 to 3.1%, and for Sub-Saharan Africa, the support for the growth in GDP was largely supported around the favorable weather conditions, which contributed positively to the agricultural sector, as well as infrastructural investment within these regions. So just looking at the East African region, the countries were on a downward trend from a GDP perspective. So Kenya 6.3% in 2018, 2019 at 5.4%. One of them is Rwanda, obviously, as you can see, 8.6% in 2018 to a high of 10.1% in 2019. And Rwanda largely driven by the infrastructural investments within the country. So in the next slide, we now come closer home in terms of the macroeconomic environment. Just before that, just some bit of global outlook. What are the experts or what are the key researchers telling us in terms of the future outlook of the economies in various regions? The IMF have projected that the global GDP will contract to minus 4.9% in 2020. For the US, minus 8%. The euro area will be largely impacted with a minus 10.2% projection in GDP for 2020. In Sub-Saharan Africa, minus 3.2%. And in Kenya, this has been projected at 1%. And obviously a bounce back in 2021. So the projection or the forecast is that by 2021, most of the economies will have now resumed to normal trade, and trade is likely to improve significantly. But the assumptions or the conditions that have been used for these projections are dependent on a number of things. One is on how long this pandemic will still be looked at from a point of trying to find a cure or a vaccine to be able to address the health concerns. And without that in place, then a number of economies will still remain under lockdown. The other is on how the citizens take their personal role of ensuring that they adhere to health standards and health requirements from a social distancing perspective and ensuring that they don't put themselves at risk. The other is in terms of the global supply chain, how this could be affected, and as a number of economies begin to slowly open up, what level of trade will continue. We have already seen some negative sentiments around China in terms of trade. We have seen Japan openly request business owners who have set up shop in China to locate their operations outside of China, either to Japan or any other area. Obviously, the tensions between China and US are likely to escalate even much higher. So that will definitely impact the GDP. And on the next slide, we then come closer home from a Kenya perspective. So looking at the GDP sector contribution, what has been driving, or what has driven the wealth generation for Kenya. And these are numbers as of 2019 from a sector GDP contribution. So looking at this, agriculture has always been the sector that has contributed significantly to GDP. So 34.1%. The other is manufacturing, wholesale, retail and trade, the financial and insurance sector, 6%. So other sectors contribute not significantly, but you can see from our assessment of impact of this pandemic on these sectors, from research that we have seen and also from our own perspective, we view impact as a result of this pandemic on agriculture. We perceive this to be low. In terms of the high-risk areas, we see this around construction, wholesale, retail and trade, accommodation and restaurant. Here, we have seen this largely, where in terms of tourism, in terms of people being able to access public places, this is one of the sectors that has been largely impacted. So our projections and just looking at the various sectors in terms of what the GDP or contribution to these sectors will be in 2020, in terms of the red markings, those are the large hits around accommodation and restaurants. As much as we slowly reopen, we are not likely to see the numbers increase immediately, especially to the later part of this year. This might pick up probably next year. However, we still see some impact around this. Transport has been impacted, especially in the second quarter, which is basically where a number of the decisions to lockdown came in. So we see that impact already in the second quarter and slightly picking up in the third and the fourth quarters going forward. Next slide. We look at what the Kenya government has done from an intervention perspective. In terms of the tax reliefs that government has put in place, from a corporate tax and a personal perspective, corporate tax reduction to 25%. In terms of VAT, 16% to 14%. Turnover tax, this largely affects the SME sectors. So in terms of reduction there from 3% to 1%. There have also been waivers on mobile fees that we have seen within the telcos as well as within the banking sectors. Central Bank of Kenya has also come in through the industry, the banking industry, to support customers who may experience liquidity challenges and will be unlikely to pay their loans within the regular fund. So there have been restructures that have been set in place where banks have been asked to, take on the cost of these restructures. So from a financing perspective for the government in terms of supplementary, you can see the numbers there in terms of allocation which the government has set aside for clearing pending bills, outstanding VAT refunds, for cash transfers to vulnerable who are obviously likely to be more impacted in this current environment. There is also additional support to the counties to assist to respond to this situation from a basis of building capacity. And then there's also some money that has been set aside for hiring additional health personnel. Next slide, please. So I also thought it important to just have a basic overview of the 2020-2021 budget. So just as I mentioned at the beginning, it is very important for the government to balance the health concern as well as the turnaround of the economy and ensuring that as much as we address the health concerns, we are also investing funds in development. We are also addressing other concerns from an economic perspective. So for the next fiscal year, the government plans to spend a total of 2.79 trillion Kenya shillings. Now, to finance this budget, the government projects to raise revenue of about 1.9 trillion Kenya shillings. It also expects to receive some grants amounting to 57.2 billion. And the shortfall of the deficit will be financed largely from borrowing, which is about 840 billion Kenya shillings. So as we look at the next slide in terms of just some key highlights on what the government is referring to as the economic stimulus package, which it has put in place as a COVID-19 response. So government has put in place or has set aside funds to support certain initiatives that it feels would likely address the health concerns as well as the economic status of the economy. One is the improvement of the road infrastructure, and here the government has set aside 10 billion for a program they are calling Kazi Mtaani, which is also expected to ensure that we also keep youth employed. So a target is 100,000 youth to get employment through this program. 5 billion has also been set aside to rehabilitate access roads as well as footbridges, some of which were affected by the heavy rains that we experienced in the last few months. There's also some allocation around education in terms of hiring of new teachers, refurbishment of classrooms. I'm not certain how that will support at this stage where in the education sector, the cabinet secretary has obviously mentioned that schools are not likely to reopen this year. Hopefully that should improve this sector next year when schools reopen. Now, from a SME perspective, the government has a stimulus package which will ensure the enhanced liquidity for the SMEs. And here there's an allocation for this fiscal year of 5 billion Kenya shillings directly to pay outstanding VAT refunds. Another 5 billion has also been set aside for pending bills. We know for quite some time now there have been pending bills owed to largely SMEs who provided services to a number of county governments as well as to the national government, and these bills have yet to be paid. So this should improve the liquidity situation for the SME. In addition to address the access to financing, the government has also set aside Kenya shillings 3 billion as seed capital for the SME credit guarantee scheme. So this should then give the commercial banks the guarantee scheme where they will be able to, get payment for any loans that might go into default. The others which I'll not touch on in terms of allocation, monies have been also set aside for the health sector, agriculture and food security, as well as support for tourism, where in the tourism sector, hotels can access financing at a very discounted rate just to support either refurbishment or to support their businesses. Also, money set aside for improving the environment, water and sanitation. We've also seen this in the media in terms of what government is doing around this, as well as one of the items in the Big Four agenda, which is supporting the manufacturing sector, is also an item that is there. So I'd like to stop there, and if there are any questions specifically touching on the macroeconomic environment, I'll be happy to respond to those questions. Back to you, Magdalene.
Thank you very much, Davis. We had a little bit of a connection issue on your side. We couldn't hear your voice very clearly, but the good news is that we will host these slides and send them to all the participants so that you can be able to get the great content. Florence has said there was great content, however, the voice breaking was a little bit of an issue. So what we will do is we'll make sure that you get these slides. The things that we covered in the session Davis covered is we're looking at the current status of COVID-19 globally, cases, deaths, recoveries. Then we also looked at flattening the curve and its effect on our GDP. And we also looked at the national and global economic outlook and what are the government interventions. So I think it's important for us going forward. So when we were looking at this particular session, we ourselves, if SME, back on track, have they thought about making a BCP, a business continuity plan? So what is a BCP and why is it important? And how can SMEs benefit from having a BCP? So this is the time that I'll introduce and invite Kai, who is Kotsanai Matereke, who is the founder and senior partner of Tactive Consulting, to take us through the next session where he will really unpack for us what is this thing that we call BCP. Everybody has a different view of what a BCP plan is. Some people, it may just be a plan that they put together once upon a time. Are you reviewing it? What do you need to put into it? And how do we come together to make sure that your BCP is something that can take your business forward? Kai, over to you.
Thank you, Magdalene. Hello to everyone on the call. My name is Kay or Kotsanai Matereke. I'm a senior partner at Tactive. To just introduce Tactive a little bit, we are an SME partner, and often our role is to help small businesses scale. In these times, we are working with different businesses to actually help them reopen. And the conversation about reopening business and generating revenue is really tied to the access to capital as we sort of go back into the market. And what we've done in partnership with SBM is really said that we want to unpack continuity planning for small businesses. Now, continuity planning or business continuity planning is not a new thing. It's something that most businesses do, but they don't realize that it is actually a formalized process. A good example of a continuity plan is if a business is situated in an area where the power is unstable, the business will embark on putting a backup generator to ensure that they stay online or to ensure that they have power. And the backup generator is essentially a continuity plan. Another example would be in the health sector. When we think about it, when hospitals are essentially under capacity, they have something that they call a locum of doctors and nurses. And these are essentially standby workers that are asked to join on call when the demand increases. As we think about COVID-19 and its effect on businesses, a lot of small businesses are finding themselves caught unaware by different challenges because they don't have continuity plans. And so the next few slides will help us understand what continuity planning is, what benefits it brings to the business, and more importantly, how you can use it to access capital. Now, a broad definition here that is essentially simplified is a continuity plan is a system of actionable steps towards prevention and recovery from potential threats to a business's operation. When we think about doing business every single day, we are learning that there are new challenges that are emerging. If we think about everything that's happening in the globe, there has been a conversation about reopening businesses. I think many medical practitioners had shared that when the economy would be reopened, the cases would increase. And what we've learned is that this is actually true. And this has led to some governments and states essentially closing down because they have to figure out how to essentially open safely. Now, when we think about continuity planning, these effects that are happening to our businesses oftentimes have a negative effect. And that negative effect is we lose revenue. We lose touch with our customer. And continuity planning is thinking about how can we essentially build in processes and systems that can anticipate the threats and mitigate them so that we can essentially recover from any unforeseen disasters. When we think about the scope, when we talk about continuity planning, it affects the teams, it affects our planning process, it affects communication. Oftentimes we test continuity plans, so you don't just plug them in and then wait. We consistently revisit and revise them. There are aspects to technology, there are aspects to other resources, and of course, health and safety. We could move to the next slide. The question that you might be asking yourself as a small business is, why would I invest in continuity planning? The challenge for a lot of small businesses right now is our access to capital has always been pegged on our historical performance. Over the last 6 months, we've seen our revenues decline. And the reason there's been a sharp decline in revenue is because 75% of most businesses are not actually ready for disasters. There's been multiple changes in the market. There's been ongoing restrictions, and these restrictions, without a continuity plan, have had a negative effect on the business. If we look a little further, the data also tells that almost 50% of all small businesses take 3 months to recover from one disaster. And what we've learned essentially with COVID-19 is that you can have an ongoing case where each month is essentially one challenge over the other. Other statistics also show that if a business basically does not get support within 5 days of a disaster, there is a probability that that business will fail, right? And it's because a lot of the structures that allow us to rebuild a business are oftentimes too costly, and without support, most businesses are likely to fail. The question about ongoing support, most businesses between 1 to 3, which is almost 30% of all the businesses that we work with, basically are going to face some type of disaster. And in this particular case, we are all facing an ongoing disaster. As Tactive, we've spent an incredible amount of time working with a number of SMEs, trying to prepare them for continuity planning. Continuity planning is a tool that just reduces the impact of the COVID environment on your business. And unless you have the right support, oftentimes it's difficult. We would go to the next slide. As part of our process, we've worked with a cohort that's actually in the SBM ecosystem. And I think we have an SME representative that is here that will share his experience around business continuity planning and how it has helped him improve his operations. A clear indicator from the work that we did with SMEs is that most SMEs will need capital to recover, to be able to restart the engines, to be able to keep the workforce on. But without positive traction in the market, it's really dependent on the controls that we put in the business. And I think those controls will be referred to as your continuity planning mechanisms. With these in place, it is easy to now speak to your financiers around access to capital. So I'm going to hand it over to Magdalene, and then she will introduce George, who can tell us about his experience.
Okay, we'd like to introduce George. Just moving into the next slide. George Wangi is a practicing accountant and a management consultant with 20 years experience in training and practice in both public and private sector institutions. He is a founding partner at GMK Accountants, a certified public accountant, and is in charge of business advisory, audit, assurance, and quality assurance. George went through this program when we were at the pilot phase, and I'd now like to introduce him just to give us some feedback as to how the business continuity program has helped him. Over to you, George.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I must sincerely thank you for inviting me to this and to give feedback on my experience with your course. Before I say how I benefited, I think that by acknowledging that I found your approach to be very good. I found your facilitators to be very well prepared for this, and all the materials that you gave us for the purpose of this course, I found it to be very, very necessary. I must admit that actually I was the materials that you gave me, that I'm still working on part of it up to date. The other thing that I found very good in your approach is that you make a follow-up. There are so many times that we attend a training and it is done after the training. No one is interested in how you meet after that. No one is interested in how you have benefited from this or whether you have responded to any assignment given, or whether you found challenges with the assignment given, that there is someone that is willing to help you to move forward with this work. So I like the follow-up. I get that you're not able to hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, George.
So I can continue. Someone typed they cannot hear me.
Yeah, I think there's a moment there when you were breaking up, but I think now you're good. Okay.
Now I'm clear. So saying that I was happy with your preparation, with the work. You had adequate materials for instruction, and you are making a follow-up on the progress that we are making with what you have given us, including the assignment. In case there are challenges, you are there and willing to help us to get through it. The other thing that I found very good was your timing. Your timing for this work, we used to attend at 8 o'clock, and there's no better time for a meeting than an early morning meeting, because it is the first thing that you do. You don't get a gap where you're trying to look for something else to do, and you end up missing something. Like daytime meetings, sometimes you get late, and many times actually you get late. Going to my benefit of this, but I must acknowledge that your choice of topic was good. Business continuity planning. It is something that we don't think about many times. And actually, when we think about business continuity planning, we think about physical disruption. But I know when we are doing internal audit of some institutions, one of the things that come to mind when you're talking about BCT is if there is a physical disruption or there is an IT disruption, where do you go from here? But your approach is one that is able to make it a bit more holistic and see that BCT is not just about physical disruption. Or like what we've learned from COVID, there can be a disruption that is coming from an epidemic or a pandemic like what we currently have. So the choice of topic is very good. And it has made me learn that it is something that I have to think about. As an accounting firm, we may not see BCP as something that can come or that we need to think much about. But now we have learned that we may even need to have a standing committee thinking about that we must have a plan, that there are so many things that can go wrong. And if they go wrong, where do we go from there? So I must admit that it is something that is helping me to think about it And I'm happy that you have also given us the approaches that we can use to manage this at farm level, which as a farm we are discussing and we actually want to adopt. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, George Mwangi, for sharing your experience and the benefits you got, especially for your industry in accounting. So, okay, I'd like to hand it over back to you just to finalize.
Great. Thank you, David. Are there any questions maybe from the audience around continuity planning? If you have any questions, please just type them into the chat box. For now, we will just proceed. And then I will take maybe some questions at the end of the session, if that's helpful. Now, I think we've seen a huge increase in access to financial services online. We've seen an increase to entertainment, online entertainment. We've seen disruption in the retail sector with delivery to the home. And what all of this is telling us is that the world that we are used to has changed, and everything is now accessible through digital. For a lot of businesses, when we start to think about continuity planning, on one part, it's managing risk. On the other part, it's also learning how to safely pivot the business into new avenues that you can begin to deliver value. And I think what it does is it ensures that even as you think about new ideas, these new ideas are not at a high risk of failure. So I'm going to walk through some of the benefits, and these benefits are things that we think are tangible for SMEs. The first, talking about saving jobs. I think globally there is a huge decline there's a contraction in the economy, and we're feeling it because people are losing their jobs, and there is a need to be able to defend these jobs. For employees, I think when they start to see your continuity plan in place, it creates a lot more confidence in the business. And I think it's a great show of faith. The second benefit is confidence in customers. Even as we're going through a very difficult time as businesses, our customers still want us to be able to deliver our promise. With the BCP in place, we can be more transparent about how we're able to deliver. And what this will do is it will put our customers to rest. A good way to think about it also is to say, when customers don't feel that their suppliers can supply, they start thinking about developing alternative solutions. And alternative solutions ultimately lead to the loss of revenue. And it's important for us to really think about how are we winning our customer confidence? How are we giving them the necessary guarantee that we're able to deliver value for them? The third benefit of continuity plans is every business has a reputation. And the challenging thing about growing a business, a small business, is that when we fail to deliver, it actually impacts how external stakeholders view our brands. And in order to protect our brand reputation for today and for the future, continuity plans help in hedging the disruption, which keeps our reputation intact. We can switch over to the next slide. Okay, I think we have a question here is how do you prepare your staff for continuity effectively in this era when the youth stay on one job and average for only 3 years? Gig economy and talent migration. Any insights? I think that's a great question. If there is a high movement of talent within the company, then the question is how do we create institutional knowledge that actually supports the business? And the high level answer is we need to build processes into the business that allow for continuity. Oftentimes we make the investment in people, which is great, is what drives growth. But for sustainability, we need to build processes. We need to create fail safes. And by doing that, we actually secure a lot of the institutional knowledge within our processes, such that if there is a turnover of talent, the next person comes in to learn the new process, and that information essentially is retained. I hope that gives a little bit of insight. And to give maybe a practical example would be in the way that we manage our clients, right? A lot of the client information is oftentimes siloed in our team, our employees' email accounts, and it's not sitting in a customer relations management system. The customer relations management system is essentially a continuity plan, right? And so thinking about that at a very high level, the processes and the tools that we are putting in place are what should protect the business in terms of longevity. And if more businesses actually invest in that particular direction, even if there is a slight churn of talent, the information is retained within the business. Another key part about continuity planning is, you're welcome, Nashan, is about the value of data. For a business to get access to capital, it means that they need to objectively represent their business. During the continuity planning process, we go through a process of essentially evaluating or auditing the risks that are around the business to be able to provide data that will inform lending decisions. So internally, this information will also highlight risks and strengths of the business that management can use to be able to essentially keep growing the business. Another benefit is, of course, mitigating financial risk. And risk comes in different forms. Currently, we have a lot of businesses who are being affected by risks. Externally, there are political effects, there are social effects, there are technological effects. And when we are able to actually manage all these risks, what we see is we are able to see a much stable business financially, and we're able to resource that business in order for it to keep growing. The last aspect is, of course, protecting your supply chain. And your supply chain basically are all the relationships that actually help you to deliver. In difficult times, it's very easy to think about yourself. It's very easy to protect what you're trying to do. But when you do a clear continuity plan, what it will do is it will highlight the need for you to invest in relationships that will give you long-term sustainability. I want to thank you and take any other questions before I move on to the last two slides. Any questions maybe about the benefits of continuity planning?
Remember, you can channel all your questions through the chat function at the bottom of your screen. So kindly do share any questions that you may have.
Great. So to maybe move to the next slide, our partnership with SBM is really about supporting SMEs to build stable businesses. And we are very aware that time is very precious at this particular time. And a lot of business people don't have time. So what we have done is we have put together a masterclass that comprises of 3 calls, which is essentially 3 hours of work. And in these 3 hours, we introduce risk management frameworks that help you actually evaluate risk in your business holistically. Once you are able to evaluate the risks, we will take you through a risk assessment through an automated platform where you are able to gain instant results of the risks around your business. Once you understand the risks, it is easy for you as an internal team to start to develop solutions. And with our support, what we will do is provide best practice and share ideas that we're learning from working with a large group of SMEs. Once the business has solutions on the table, we'll have them complete a continuity plan, which is a document that you can use to share with your external stakeholders or with the team to help them understand how strong the company is and how you have an existing plan to deal with the risks at hand. Then the last call would really be about coaching you on continuity planning. Continuity planning has two sides, one being risk management, but the other is also transitioning safely into new opportunities. And at the end of the day, after these three calls, a business would have reskilled and will understand key dynamics on risk management. They would have developed a continuity plan. They would be able to speak to their bankers and their finances a bit more effectively, and they will have tools that they can continue to use as they navigate the COVID environment. The call to action that we would put out to small businesses today, next slide, is that all of us need to now reskill and learn how to manage risks in this new environment. I think we've heard it several times over that COVID is not going away, and businesses need to begin to adjust and acquire skills that allow them to move forward. SBM and Tactive will be hosting this masterclass on risk management, where we will be equipping small businesses on business continuity planning. The dates will be the 3rd of August for one workshop, and then the other workshop will be on the 14th of August. The cost will be 10,000 shillings per business for essentially 4 sessions. I did represent 3 calls. One is an onboarding call, just to make sure we know each other in our cohort. And then the other 3 calls are essentially the process that we have taken you through. There is an opportunity for you to register for this process. And for the first 25 businesses that register, SBM and Tactive will provide a 25% discount on the email that's technically provided. I'll ask the team to put the registration email, and the deadline will be the 24th of July. We believe that with strong continuity planning processes, small businesses can access capital more effectively. And that's the role that we want to play in partnership with SBM. Thank you very much. I think there may be 2 more questions. What are some of the immediate stopgap measures an SME can put in place now to move forward, especially the hard-hit industries like hospitality and tourism? I think that's a great question. In terms of stopgap measures, the stopgap measures are starting with understanding how COVID is affecting your business from a risk perspective. It is very difficult for you to pick one avenue. For instance, talking about revenue generation without looking at the risks that are coming from the supply chain. So my first call to action would be start by assessing holistically what are all the risks that surround the business so that you can then make an informed decision. For hospitality and tourism, I think there are a lot of conversations that are coming into play, and these conversations about pivoting their business models, looking at how they can use their current assets for other uses to generate revenue either in the interim or to begin to accommodate essentially a new way of doing things. I will just highlight maybe an example of how a lot of businesses are now moving away from holding large real estate, right? And now they're saying their teams can work remotely. But these businesses, once in a while, will need stronger, large spaces for them to actually congregate and create a bond between their teams. And the question is, how can the hospitality industry take advantage of this shift that's happening in the commercial space. And in doing so, they will be pivoting their model to provide support that some corporates would need. That's one example. Another example would be for tourism and travel. A lot of the capabilities within that business is about connecting one destination to the other, right? And ensuring that there are people who can make that process simpler. People are not traveling anymore, but what we see is that goods are still moving. And so supply can, supporting supply and sourcing of goods is a capability that people in the travel and tourism sector can actually latch onto effectively. Thank you very much. Over to you, Magdalene.
Right. Thank you, Kay, for taking us through the BCP and your approach on the three-step business continuity planning process. Just to reiterate, a number of ways in which SMEs can benefit from having a business continuity plan. One of them, it has the potential to save jobs. It builds confidence amongst your customers. It preserves your brand value and your reputation. It helps mitigate your financial risk. It protects your supply chain. More importantly, it provides valuable data that can help you get facilities in financial institutions. So that takes us to the next phase of our presentation today. And this is to do with SME financing. Our host for this session will be Fenwick Mbaka, who is the head of SME and commercial banking at SBM Bank. So over to you, Fenwick.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, David. And thank you, Kay and Davis, for setting the stage for what I'm about to say next. So we just speak about SMEs. We will all note that SMEs and MSMEs are the backbone of the economy. I think that has been stated. And even the national government has actually started putting aside funds to facilitate this special sector because it's actually very critical for the economy. However, they've been affected, as we all know, by COVID. COVID has not spared anyone at the moment. And SMEs largely rely on corporates and the national governments, including county, who have not been able to make payments necessarily on time. There's also been lack of employment to some extent, which has affected the retail end of the business, which means as well that business has gone down for this space. Well, some good news that the SME Credit Guarantee Fund should come in and help on this. But like Kay said, part of what we look at is how is the business prepared for continuity, which will be very critical. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I've touched on this already. What I probably want to say is that for MSMEs and SMEs to grow, they need capital. So part of what we look at in terms of some of the pointers that I want to give, building up on what Kay has just mentioned, is one, so some questions to ask yourselves. Do you bank all the receivables? And does this correspond to all the sales? And would this also be reflected on your management or audited accounts? Because for us, it's critical in terms of them making sense and ensuring that the entries correlate. So it is imperative for businesses that even if you're doing a cash business, when you're paid, please go and bank that money, then withdraw it and go and make your purchase. This helps a lot in terms of account activity, and I will demonstrate why in some few coming slides. It also helps show your business history in terms of what your sales are. So do you also maintain a debtors and creditors list, and do you age the same? Aging the same means do you reflect how long a debt has been outstanding, or do you reflect how long a payment to a supplier is outstanding? This is also very critical for us, and it will help you manage your business properly. Are you getting your receivables on time? Do you know who owes you money? I think that's another question that some of the businesses have been asking themselves. So do you maintain registers for all your banking? So do you preserve your banking slips, your petty cash expenditure vouchers, your purchases, any receipts that you get, any expenses that you make, Do you know what stocks you're holding and what sales have been for the day? Again, this is what Kay was touching about on data. Makes it very simple, even for when an auditor comes to be able to do your books, and which will tally even with your bank statements when you submit them to the bank for evaluation of your facility. Next, please. So and then again, and the good thing with technology right now is you are able to have systems in place or software in place that can help you manage your stock levels. This should also be able to help you determine which stock is moving, which stock would be supposedly dead stock, because dead stock again is tying your capital, which you don't need to have at this time. So that helps you as well. One of the other key things I think we need to also embrace. Let's go back to the slide. One of the other things that we need to embrace is having shared resources. Do you need to have an accountant on board, or could you outsource this service? Including HR, marketing aspects, the payment of tax, it helps save on your costs. And at this point in time, we all need to retain as much money as we can into the business because liquidity is key at the moment. So this will be very critical. Have you embraced the vision of avenues for payments or receipt of payments, such as M2B, which SBM offers, SPS? We have cards and online banking. We'll mention a bit of this towards the end. And then the last point on this aspect is make sure that when you're making a payment, especially when issuing an instrument like a check, you have sufficient balance in the account to make this payment. And this will become critical in the coming slides. Next, please. So, as SBM Bank, we're here to help businesses and support them in terms of growing. And by this, we provide loans. And on this particular case, I'll be talking on unsecured loans. Just to mention is that our loan, this aspect of the loan that we're going to be talking about is for supporting working capital needs and not growing your capex. So for capex, we have other facilities that can help you, including asset finance, mortgages, term loans. That will help you in growing your capex. But for this unsecured product that we're going to talk about, is specifically for your working capital needs. Next, please, Shani. So part of the unique features about our product is it's a loan that's provided for 12 months, and our maximum loan amount is 5 million shillings. The facilities are available to both SBM account holders and non-SBM account holders, subject to two aspects. If you're an SBM account holder, your business should have at least banked with us for minimum 1 year. If you're a non-SBM bank account holder, your business should have performed for a minimum of 3 years, and we'll define more about the performance. Average balance maintained in the account must be at least double the anticipated monthly installment. What does this mean? If you're expecting to get a loan where you'll be paying about 15,000 shillings, for example, as a monthly installment, then your average balance maintained in the account must be at least 30,000 shillings, which is double that amount. Which comes back to my question: do you bank all the receivables? Because that's going to be key for us lending to you. Your loan amount shall be double the average monthly turnover over a period of 1 year, up to a maximum of 5 million shillings. So the aspect of banking and ensuring you bank all the receivables increases your chances of about the amount you'll be able to benefit from and get from the bank. Because remember, we're looking at monthly turnover on the average for a whole 12 months. So if you get your cash and then go and just make purchases for banking, you're losing that history, which then again, you're losing the benefit of borrowing. Your account turnover should not decline by more than 25% in the preceding 90 days. Now, we know COVID has affected a lot of businesses, and this is very critical. However, if you're maintaining your data, especially the data side of the list, you're able to still aggressively follow up for your debts, which kind of ascertains that you are getting some income back into your account. This helps on the monthly turnover that I talked about. Next, please. Yes, so again, if you're in trading, especially if you're doing cash business, so you're a restaurant, you're in a kiosk somewhere or hardware, you cannot have nil banking. So you cannot channel the money to, say, buy a plot and then expect that we'll be able to advance it. No, the money must be retained in the business and must be banked. That's the only way you can be able to sustain that you're going to grow your business. Again, the money that we're lending you is to grow this particular business. For diversification, we have facilities that can actually enable you to do that. So if you want to get a plot, if you want to open a new business, we have other facilities that can help you make sure that this happens without you interrupting with the current operations of the business. Again, you should not have overdrawn more than 3 times against any borrowing limit you have. So if you have an overdraft facility of say 20 million shillings and you overstep that 20 million shillings for whatever reason, that's fine. Business requires this one once in a while, but it cannot be more than 3 times. Again, it comes to what Kay was talking about in terms of planning. So have you planned your business properly? Do you know how your your cash flow projections reflect? Do you know how you anticipate to be, say, 6 months from now? If you do and you're planned properly, then you'll be able to have approached the bank in due course or in good time to be able to arrange the facility for you in place so that you don't have to overstep. So that, again, the essence of why business continuity and the planning essence of it is very key for when we're looking at lending. You should not have more than one refer to draw a check to be unpaid. So you have a chance, maybe something happened or some payment delayed and you issued a check, which again is what we were saying. Please issue payments, especially checks, when you have funds. Do not issue in anticipation of funds like we normally do. It hurts your business once you have unpaid checks in your account on your bank statements. Further, we do allow top-ups once you're paid up to a minimum of 50% of your loan amount or twice. So you can borrow 1 million shillings, pay down to 500,000, top up again, whatever monthly turnover you have been able to pay, so about 1.5, pay down to 750,000, and then top up again for the last one. But on the third top up, you need now to pay fully for the facility, so now we can start again that cycle. And with that, I think I will rest there. So there's a question from Brian. What's the time frame on the unsecured SME product from when I request it? So it's between 24 hours and 72 hours, depending on the definition that you submitted. What we require from you in terms of understanding your business. So if everything is in place, 24 hours. If we require information from you, which we shall come back to immediately, is maximum of 72 hours. So I don't know if there are any other questions, or I hand over back to David. Mr. Kanyara.
David, I have a few questions that I might need to respond to, so you will just let me know when.
Sure. Okay, you can proceed.
Great. I think the first question was, is it ever too late, too early or too late to activate a continuity plan? The answer is no, because risk is essentially ongoing. So there's no time like the present. The next question is around the hospitality industry and whether they should consider, like, horizontal integration is not working. Should they be considering vertical integration as the more resilient option? I definitely think that the vertical integration is the less costly, and it essentially increases the value that you gain. It reduces the cost, but also increases the value that you gain. So at this particular time, I think with COVID, acquisitions are a bit delicate. It doesn't guarantee revenue. A lot of industries are actually experiencing revenue loss. So a key thing is looking at how you can build stronger partnerships rather than acquisitions to see an increase or a lift in revenue. Or if you end up owning additional assets at this time, it might lead to more cash constraints or more technical issues within the value chain. The next question was around how BCP might not apply in the construction industry. With continuity planning, we don't have to think about it in one dimension. We actually have to think about it in the sense that even in construction, when there is no work, the question is when should we project that there will be no work, right? So the risk when there is no work is that we still have to maintain overheads, we still have to manage a team. So question is, do we want to develop a cross-functional team so that they can serve other purposes if it's not core construction? Do we want to change their contracts for salaries? Because at the end of the day, it depends on the risk that you're managing. If you think that the risk here is, maintaining overheads, which essentially will lead to loss of margins, then it means you will develop a solution that is actually very custom to your situation. So there is no place where continuity planning or risk management doesn't apply. It just doesn't always come across as working remotely. It's about mitigation and control and developing other alternative avenues that may be viable for the business. For instance, if you have an incredible team, you know that you don't have work, you choose to partner with another company that has additional work at this particular time, you get a very lean margin, and then you second, 50% of your team to the other business. All of these are creative solutions to be able to reduce the risk that your business would face simply because there isn't any work. I will say I'm not the expert here. I think with a situation like COVID, it's a novel environment. It's never been done before. And so we need to be able to test and learn quickly. And I think as you're working with different people, you might come across even more creative solutions that can help manage or mitigate any of the risks that you're facing. I think those were the main questions on my end. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. We are still receiving questions. If there are any more, you can put them in the chat section. But as we come to a close, I'd like to thank all of you for really joining us today. We've got some really good insights and some great content on BCP. Now that you understand or have at least an inclination as to what you need to do to put together your BCP as SBM, we want to help you become masters at this. So we have a masterclass and we're encouraging you to join us. So sign up. You can send your request to marketing@sbmbank.co.ke or info@tactive.consulting. We'll be able to get your request and we will now register you as part of the masterclass and keep you updated on anything that comes up as a result of that. We will be sharing this presentation with all of you through your email addresses as registered, and you'll be able to get a copy of this presentation and reach out to us at any time. Without further ado, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. We are at the 12:45 mark, and I would like to close this session unless we have any other queries from the members. Vanessa, thank you very much. You said that we had great content today, and I thank you for really honoring our request to join us, and we do hope that you'll be able to join us as part of the masterclass. Without further ado, thank you very much. We'll be closing this session unless you have any other questions, and please work on your BCP plan. That is going to help you carry your business throughout this new normal that we are now facing.